Hello and welcome to After Scientology, Straight Up and Vertical, the weekly show where Tony Ortega and I get together and go over the week's events in Scientology as reported on Tony's Substack. You see the address right there on the screen. Hey, Tony, you are remote this week, yeah? Birthday?
I'm on the road. Yeah, thank you. For my birthday, I gave myself the present of suffering with 3 days of cycling from New York to Boston because I'm crazy.
That is a mad trip, and mad props to you for making it, by the way. I'm a little envious. Um, Cool. What a great way to spend the time. All right, let's get into it, folks. We've got some things to cover this week. It was an interesting week, Scientologically. First story, and one that the headline actually made me laugh out loud: Scientology's L. Ron Hubbard's holy sites. What was this story about? We've been seeing these things popping up for a while, but now we have a whole medley of these things. Yeah.
Well, earlier we talked about this house in Elizabeth, New Jersey, that Ron and Sarah and the baby Alexis were renting in 1950 when the book Dianetics came out. Ron had finished up the manuscript when they were living in Bay Head, New Jersey, on the shore. But once the book was going to come out, he knew that there was going to be interest and that he might be able to generate some actual business. And so he didn't want to be out at the shore. He wanted to be someplace more, closer to New York City, I think. And so they moved up to Elizabeth, which is much more industrial kind of town. Sarah hated it, and they rented this house. And then, sure enough, when the book came out, he started getting a lot of interest from people that wanted to try out this counseling he describes in the book. And so he opened his first Dianetic Counseling Foundation in town. Not they were renting a house where they lived, but in town he opened an office. Well, Scientology is conveniently ignoring that part, and they're saying that this house was the first Dianetic Counseling Foundation. I don't think it was. He may have brought some people back there and done a little courses, but clearly he was doing it in town. But anyway, there's no question that Ron and Sarah were living in this house. And so Scientology has bought it. They have this subsidiary. The most secretive of all the Scientology subsidiaries is CST, the Church of Spiritual Technology. CST has a subsidiary called Heritage Properties that buys these things and then renovates them and turns them into holy shrines, the Hubbard. And of course, what's fun, there's one of the many things we've talked about this before, Chris. One of the funny things, okay, about it is that you will not find any mention or any sign that Hubbard was there with anyone. Of course, there will be no mention of Sarah or the baby, but they've done their best to restore it to its condition in 1950. But also, we knew about that. But what I noticed on the slideshow from the birthday celebration was Miscavige also announced two other properties that CST was opening up. The Elizabeth House was opened up in April, and that's where Hubbard was living in 1950. He said that in sometime this month, in May, it may have already happened, they had a grand opening for a house in Phoenix on Osborne Road that Hubbard was living in 1954. And I think by then he would have been with Mary Sue. It wasn't with
That's
Sarah
right.
anymore.
That's right.
Very nice house. I put up some interior pictures. One thing Ron really liked was this house in the desert had little porthole windows that reminded him of a ship. And in 1954, it was after he had been the veteran in World War II and before he had gone back to sea on the Apollo and all that. But he had those little portholes in his house. So that opened up this month, and then in June, they Miscavige said they're opening up this house in the former Salisbury, Rhodesia, which is now Harare, Zimbabwe, where Hubbard was in 1966 when he had that crazy plan of maybe taking over Rhodesia and making it the first Scientology country. That you know, again, they've restored it to what it looked like in 1966 when Hubbard lived there. Interesting interiors, including some suits of his that that's what makes it such an interesting kind of museum. And that is the room. I don't know if you noticed the picture on the wall. That is the room he's sitting in when he does that filmed interview with Tony Kitchener that is so familiar to all of us that they used footage of it and Going Clear and all that, where Ron says some really funny, creepy things. And what's fun is that when Scientology refers to that, they claim it's the only filmed interview Ron Muscat, Ron Hubbard ever gave.
Nope.
And it's funny the way they say that. Okay, we understand you don't like the one he gave in 1968 what was it, the Incredible Shrinking World of L. Ron Hubbard,
Yep.
when he was interviewed by Archie.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
That's,
Charlie
that's
Nairn.
it.
When
That's
Charlie
it.
Nairn interviewed him for Granada Television in 1968 on board the Apollo,
Yep.
uh, you know, they don't like that one, but it's funny that they pretend it doesn't even exist, you know. But that is the room where he filmed that interview with Tony Kitchener. So fascinating places.
Yep.
And I don't know, Chris, what do you think? I mean, I have to admit that if I were a Scientologist and worshipped Hubbard the way they do, of course they always insist, Scientology insists, we don't say he was a god, we don't worship him like a god. He was just a very remarkable, maybe the most remarkable man who ever lived. But come on, these are holy sites, right? There's Scientologists expected to make some pilgrimages. What do you think about that?
Well, they are. That is absolutely true. And the expectation at the events when these things are announced is, hey, this is a place you can go visit and you can follow in Ron's footsteps. And this is how it's marketed to Scientologists. And sure enough, Scientologists go check these places out if it's convenient to do so, or on their vacation, or maybe some of them even make vacations around these things. I actually wouldn't know. When I was in, nobody was doing that, but it's possible. The properties are interesting because also I think as Alex you mentioned pointed out in the podcast, this is something that you can bring government officials to, and I think this is probably where they get a lot more traction out of these properties as to like, why would you invest what is going to end up being a price tag of millions for each of these properties by the time they get finished with all the restorations, and they are literally recreating furniture. I mean the clothes, all of it. There must be some return on that investment. Miscavige does not like spending money for no reason. This is why Dianetics doesn't get promoted anymore, because he just refuses to spend money on it. So why spend money on all this? There must be a compelling reason that he feels that this needs to be done. And I think Alex is actually kind of nailing it as far as utility. Bringing government officials or public figures to these sites, it's going to impress people, especially when they have no backstory, no research. And we know, Tony, how little public officials do research.
No,
Right?
no, it's incredible.
And being taken to such a property, they would actually consider research. Like, look, I went, I looked, I saw this stuff. They told me it was so amazing. And so they think they know something, about L. Ron Hubbard and Scientology. So, and looks are everything. And when you can touch and feel it, it makes it a lot more real for people. So I get it. There is a utility to these things. Let me comment real fast on a couple things. In the story, the lore within Scientology, whether it's true or not, I actually cannot say. I've only seen one photo to corroborate this. But the lore within Scientology is that L. Ron Hubbard's personal home was flooded with so many inquiries and people literally coming to him, demanding he lecture and give them more information about Dianetics, that he started setting up shop in his rented house, and they were using other rented rooms, and it got so full they had to go to town to get the property that they did. I'm not saying that's what happened.
I mean
I'm
that,
saying that's
Chris,
the lore.
that could be. When I was so what happened was in late March or something, a reader of mine sent me a copy of the invite for the grand opening of the Elizabeth House in April.
Yeah.
And so before writing about it, I went back to Russell Miller's book to remind myself of this period and read over what Russell Miller said was that he and Ron and Sarah and Alexis was born when they were at the Bayhead house
Mm-hmm.
on the shore as Ron was finishing up the manuscript. And then he was talking to Campbell about it, the editor, right? Astounding, and because they had been promoting it in Astounding, and then as the book was coming out, Ron anticipated that there would be interest, and so he dragged Sarah and the baby up to Elizabeth, and Sarah
Mhm.
hated it. And then the way Russell says is he just said that he opened an office in Elizabeth,
Mhm.
and that's where he held his classes. Now, whether he held some first at his house and then at the office, that could be, I don't know. And maybe there'll be one of my readers said that they were able to figure out where the office was. I'm sure Scientology knows all about that. So
Oh yeah.
I don't know. That could be Chris. I was just going on what I reread in Russell Miller's book. That's not a period that I'm expert on or anything like that. But
Oh, no worries. No worries.
either way, there's no question Ron lived there at a very important time in his life,
Yep.
and I understand why Scientology wants to get control of that and then turn it into a showpiece. But it is interesting, this idea that will wealthy Scientologists really be encouraged to go there or not, or are they just going to save it for foreign dignitaries and stuff? I don't know.
Well, I will say that they are because when I was in, they were. I saw that, so I'll say that they are, and I think Scientologists are because also everything I just said actually about public officials and government officials going and touching and feeling and all that, making it feel more real, more connected. That's doubly, triply applicable to Scientologists. If they go into those properties and start touching and feeling Hubbard's tape recorders and porthole windows and stuff, they're absolutely going to be more dedicated Scientologists at the end of the thing. That would definitely be the point of that. So that undoubtedly.
Yeah, so I think I said Tony Kitchener. It's Tony Hitchman was the
There we
name
go.
of the interviewer. This is what I get for just saying it off the top of my head, not looking it up to double check. See, that's the difference, Chris, is when I publish stuff, I double check it and proofread it. When we talk like this, it's you make mistakes. So I made a mistake. It was Tony Hitchman, and it's a great interview. I mean, there's some very funny moments of Hubbard in that Alex Gibney used it great in Going Clear.
Yeah, it really is. It's very insightful if you watch it with a critical eye. It's
Yeah, yeah.
very insightful because Hubbard doesn't give one straight answer and he's all over the place. And it's really quite interesting. And I actually met Tony Hitchman because he was in Santa Barbara and knew him for years. He was a very pleasant man, but his brain was completely addled by Scientology. And I don't even say that in a mean way. It was a little, he just was. He was a Scientologist when he interviewed Hubbard. He pretended not to be, and they put that out as though he wasn't when he was. So just some more lore
Interesting.
for you there. And
Yeah.
just another fun fact on Elizabeth is where Hubbard he set up his first Hubbard Dianetics Foundation, but do you know when it ended? Because there was a investigation leading to Dianetics being shut down over practicing medicine without a license. And Hubbard skipped town, total fly-by-night operation, and went to Wichita, Kansas. And the staff at the Elizabeth Foundation had to shut it down and take all the mailing lists and everything and come out to Wichita and start all over again. So Elizabeth was actually the rise and fall of Dianetics in its first iteration. So a lot of history
Well,
there.
that's what's, I mean, it's a fascinating period because
Mm-hmm.
he has this huge success with the book
Yep.
and people getting interested and creating foundations and getting all this actual movement going. And then within a year, his life is in the toilet. I mean, 1950 was a magical year for him, but 1951 was a nightmare.
That's
I
right.
mean, Sarah was publicly denouncing him in the newspapers and complaining he was insane and a monster. He had absconded to Cuba with Alexis. The Dianetics was in bankruptcy. Yeah, he went to
Yeah.
Wichita, and there was this oil tycoon who rescued him. But he had started over again. This is why when he started over again, he couldn't use the word Dianetics because it was in bankruptcy. That's why he had to come up with the name Scientology. I remember when I was first talking to Marty Rathbun about all this, he was like, "No, Scientology was like a greater subject." I'm like, Marty, he had to come up with a new name because the other one was in bankruptcy. And I realized that Scientologists don't know their own Scientology history because
That's right.
it's kept from them. It's kept away from them.
That's
Um,
exactly right. Which I actually wonder, and I'll say this right now. We'll see where this goes. I wonder if Scientology is actually going to restore Wichita, go find that property and restore it, because Wichita was a very controversial point in Scientology's history. And I don't know if they want to open that Pandora's box, actually. So we'll see. They're
yeah,
really
see,
good at covering stuff
that's the
up.
other thing. That's the other thing we've talked about is how about some other sites from Robert's life? Like, what
Yeah,
about the place in Cuba where he absconded with the baby? What about
exactly. I'd like to see some of those trails, How about that little shack he supposedly wrote Excalibur in, All right. Moving right along. Brooke Gibbs and the Clearwater situation. Let's go ahead and revisit that.
Yeah, well, we talked a lot about in the previous couple of weeks about this situation with the street in Clearwater, and what a remarkable thing it turned out to be that David Albritton, one of the city councilmen, changed his mind about supporting David Miscavige's project to vacate and then purchase this street that would be right in the middle of this giant project that Miscavige wants to build, L. Ron Hubbard Hall and L. Ron Hubbard Park. And the city is going to say no. Well, at the last minute, Miscavige withdrew his application because he didn't want a no vote to ruin it. And supposedly he'll come back later with a new application. Well, clearly, the reason this all went down this way was that Brooks Gibbs and grassroots movement he got going approached the city council with a last minute alternate proposal. Then the city council voted to at least wait and look it over. And I don't know that Brooks Gibbs and the Save the Garden people will end up getting to do what they want to with that street, but by just merely proposing it and the amount of interest they got so quickly, I think no question made the city council rethink things, and they got that one vote switched that they needed to go from 3-2 in favor of Scientology to 3-2 against Scientology. So no question that this was a big, big, and it's great to see the people of Clearwater fighting for their city's future. So I give Brooks Gibbs a lot of credit, and we had a nice conversation, and he kind of gave a little history of that movement and how he first got involved and where the idea came from. Didn't actually come from him. A woman that had spoken up to the city council at a meeting and had mentioned that there was this interesting history of African American business district there that had been kind of forgotten. And then Brooks Gibbs kind of seized on that and said that would be a much better use of that property is to remember that. So we went over that, but then I have to tell you, the best thing in that interview was um, the way I got onto this whole story was a while back. I don't know how many weeks ago. I got a tip that the city council members had met privately, one on one, with David Miscavige. And the reason Miscavige does that is he knows if he gets them in a group, it becomes a public meeting, and you have to keep record of it. But he can meet them one on one, and there's no record of it. So he had done that in order to get people on board with this project. And that's how I heard that they were even doing this. I hadn't heard that before. So we started reporting on that. And it became clear that the two city council members that are most in favor of this sale to Miscavige are this Ryan Cotton guy and a Mike Menino. And they're, like I said, they're the ones most in favor. But Brooks tells this great story where he met with Menino, and Menino described that private meeting with Miscavige. And he
Oh,
said, Miscavige sat down and said, okay, we have an hour. I'm going to use 57 minutes. You get 3. And then he pounds on the table. And
what?
then yes. And then he just goes on this presentation, shows a video, talks, and then finally, with exactly 57 minutes later, okay, your turn. And Menino said he just thought it was so weird. He smacked the table and said, I just wanted to see what that felt like. Now I love this anecdote because it's so like little David Miscavige to do that. But I also think to myself, well, Menino, if you thought this was so strange and you had that kind of a clever reaction, why in the meetings are you so advocating so strongly for Scientology's project? I don't get that, but I was really glad that Brooks told me that story. I just another little bit of David Miscavige lore that we can remember because it sounds so much like him. But
Yeah,
yeah, it was
for
fun. It was
sure.
fun talking to him. But I do give Brooks Gibbs a lot of credit for making the city council at least take a second and look this over. And Dave's plan got stymied. So in the future we don't know. They may come back with it. But my main question is, does this slow down the hall itself? Because Scientology does own the land that the hall is going to be on and that the park is going to be on. They just
Mhm.
want this little street that's in between them.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this slows down that whole project or not. So we'll see.
Yeah, well, I don't know what factors are at play in Miscavige's head, and I don't know that we ever will when it comes to that sort of thing, you know. But what an anecdote! What an anecdote! I mean, wow. Because you wonder, does Miscavige come in and bring on the charm, or what does he do, you know? And no, he comes in and tries to steamroll them. Of course he does, because he's tone 40. 57 minutes and you get 3. I love it. I am taking charge. Okay, well, we'll see what happens with this. I mean, there is no reason Miscavige could not break ground and get going on LRH Hall at this point. There's no reason whatsoever, street or not. And I would think he would move forward at this point because I think he's going to lose face if he doesn't, just to use that term, because he's already made promises. So, but
Well,
Miscavige breaks his promises
he
all the
made
time.
promises at the birthday event that they're breaking ground in summer, but that's promises to his abject followers.
Right.
We've seen him in the past say things to them and then delay or not do it.
That's right.
He doesn't worry about saving face with them.
Not
It's
really.
not really. So
You're
I
right.
I can I can see it either way. I can see him going ahead and breaking ground on the hall construction this summer. I can also see him delay the whole thing a year until they've, or 2 years,
Absolutely.
wait for a new city council and do it again. Who knows?
That's right. And either one is legit right now. We'll see. It's a little hard to predict that man when it comes to this level of tactical, you know. Um, Interesting stuff though. So, Los Angeles. Aftermath Foundation posts 20 billboards
Oh,
countering Scientology. And what happened this week?
yeah, I want to thank Phil Jones. I let a few folks know that I was going to be on the road and could use a little help, and Phil sent me a great article. The Aftermath Foundation, and in particular, with help from Alex Barnes Ross and Catherine Olson, really worked hard to get 20 billboards put up in LA, and near Scientology sites. They worked hard to get good sites. And Phil notes that the 20 was for the first month, and then after that, it's going to be 10 for a whole year. I mean, it's not cheap.
Hmm.
Aftermath Foundation raised money and they're paying for it. So Scientology, we knew Scientology was really upset. Remember, I heard from Claire Headley that they were particularly upset that in the quote in the billboard that features Mike Rinder, the word cult is used, and that they were really unhappy about that. Well, now we got new detail from Phil that Scientology actually went to the billboard company, Lamar, and offered to buy them out on all those contracts and replace those billboards. And Lamar said no, they're not for sale.
Good
So
job,
in
Lamar.
Scientology then just bought 20 of their own. They put up
Yep.
20 of their own billboards. I am a Scientologist. Are you curious? Things as a way to kind of combat it. And I don't know. I don't know how good their locations are, but I mean, what do you think? That's as Patty said to me. She said they're trying to out. It's a Scientology term called out create.
Yep.
They're trying to out create with their own billboards to suppress the in theta. Is
You
that
got
what's
it.
going on, Chris?
That's exactly what they're doing, especially because they couldn't replace those. And I do want to throw out a kudos to Lamar because in this cynical world, money often wins, but in this case, hey, maybe not. Now, yes, Scientology believes that their billboards will somehow counter the messaging of the aftermath billboards. But here's the reality of the situation, at least as I see it, and I think you all see this too. Those billboards are going to be the same messaging as the X billboards to the public. They're going to, because Scientology's name is so toxic, their brand is so bad that when people see it and see "I'm a Scientologist" campaign, they react negatively to it. Not a campaign that draws in new members, as we know. So this is just going to be more fail on their part, and it's one of those points where the cult is living in a bubble world, and they might not like the label. It's just a word, and the word indicates that it's people who live in a bubble world, and that's what they're doing. So this campaign is actually going to be more help to the aftermath than it is to Scientology, and that's my take on it, at least, and I'll stand by that. So keep going, Scientology. Okay, now on that note of Scientology's lame promo actions, we had a Spotify channel report. What was this about?
Yeah, I got a reader pointed out to me that there's an actual Scientology channel on Spotify. So I asked Jeff Levin to take a look at it because he's an actual musician, and he and I both listened to the songs. Oh, I was disappointed because there there have been some Scientology songs that I've actually really enjoyed,
Sure.
particularly with Chili B. You remember the San
Yeah.
Francisco rap artist did some really pretty cool songs. I dug that song Defiant, um, Dauntless, Defiant, and Resolute, the
Yeah.
IAS slogan. He
Yeah.
turned that into a pretty cool song back in the day. None of his stuff is on there. It's basically just songs that are from the Super Bowl ads, and Jeff really does a fun job taking them apart and showing how soulless they are. And then he talks about how Scientology, really is not good for creative artists, and how it really kind of harms their creativity and their progress as artists. So I
Yeah.
thought I appreciated that he took the time to do that. That did make me wonder about Chili B. I haven't seen any new music from him. He posted something about a year ago about some health issues. I reached out to him through his website. I did have a conversation with him years and years ago, and I'd like to see how he's doing because they were treating him like quite a celebrity and flying him all around. He performed at an IAS meeting back in the day, so I'd like to hear how he's doing. But yeah, these are just not very memorable songs.
No, and such a pathetic assortment as well, because there's no less than one, two, three, four, five Scientology, five, six, seven, eight Scientology music albums, going all the way back to the 70s, if you want to include the Apollo stars. But coming into the 80s, Road to Freedom, Joy of Creating, there's full albums that Scientology musicians have professionally produced. Which is the only reason they have any legs at all. Because if left to Scientology, it would be not very good. And to Jeff's point, it's kind of funny because I independently answered a question today on my Q&A show about that exact same thing, about does Scientology stifle creativity of its artists? And of course it does, because it binds their choices and limits their thinking. That's what cults are all about. So of course it's going to have a negative impact on people's creativity. I don't think that's rocket science to see that. So Spotify channel. I'm honestly like a little like, why so little Scientology? You have an opportunity, like it almost feels like every opportunity they have to promote or use an avenue of promotion, they fail miserably at, or they do in such a half-assed way that it just falls apart very, very quickly. And having been in the Sea Org, I know why they do that, but it is funny to see it from the outside and how incompetent it appears, you know? Only because I guess the reason why that still hangs up in my head a little bit is because one of the things we used to tell ourselves in the Sea Org is how competent we were all the time. So yeah. Okay, this last one is a pretty interesting story. This was Alex Barnes Ross, protests, UK. What do we got on this one?
Yeah, so after Alex has staged a couple protests outside the IAS meeting at St. Hill. Scientology has asked the local government to pass a special law ordinance they have in England called a PSPO that would basically make it illegal to protest outside of St. Hill, which seems extreme. And but the local government is going through the process, and that involved observers watching this last protest in this last October, and submitting. They're getting reports from the various police agencies and all that. The latest news that Alex wanted to share with us is that the regional district has sent him a letter saying, before we make any decisions, is there some way we could come to some voluntary agreement between you and the church? And they list all of these. You would be agreeing to this, they would be agreeing to that. And before he, makes any moves on that, Alex wanted to get some input from the public. So he gave me that letter so we can publish it. And, some of it is the council asking for them to just follow the law as it is anyway. Some other things seemed a little bit like they'd be giving up some rights. Like one thing was they would say that you can't film or photograph people going in there. I know the law is a little different in the UK. In the United States, you can take pictures from the sidewalk. It's just the way it is. But I don't know how Alex feels about it yet. I think he wanted to hear from people. A lot of really good comments from readers uh, with suggestions on what to do. And we'll see what he does. But that's interesting that the government kind of wants both sides to kind of agree to something.
Right.
A lot of people were cautioning Alex that this is a little bit of a trap because once the protesters agree to give up certain things, there's no guarantee that Scientology is going to follow its own
That's right.
guidelines. So
That's right.
I don't know. I appreciate that Alex wanted the bunker community to weigh in, and I'll be checking in with him to see. Should be pretty soon. I'll find out what he's going to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad he did. And I'm glad he shared the amount of detail that he did because it was quite, well, for me as a, red-blooded American with my Bill of Rights, I look at, at the British thing and I'm like, I've already had issues with their freedom of speech over there. And now we come to freedom of protest. And I have very, very, very wide open ideas about this. I mean, short of, massacres or something, which obviously nobody wants violence. And I would always support rules against violence. That's about the only rules I'm down with when it comes to protests. I think protests are inherent and powerful, and the only real power we as a citizenry have. So to limit or prescribe or say, you can't film, you can't shoot, move, what are you talking about? That's insane. I want rights to voice what I want to voice. And as a group of people, we can do that. So I, of course, am coming in with, don't agree to any of it. But because you got to fight for your right to protest. You have to. You have to. And every single concession you give, voluntarily or not, is a concession of your rights. And we have too few of those these days. That's my stump speech on it, but I wanted to share my views on that. I encourage everybody to please look into what Alex posted because it's like I said, it's detailed stuff, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. So go, Alex. And that's the other thing about this, by the way, that is the context of this is a little bit silly to me. Reason why is because Alex went, and I know went way out of his way. Every protest he's done to make sure they are civil, that they are rational, that they are respectful. Every checkbox. They are as near, dare I say, they are as near perfect protests as you can get. And we have to deal with all of this falderall because the Church of Scientology is a little offended. I mean, give me a break. This is a totalitarian international, scam. So it's a little bit of a silly thing in the context of what we're really looking at. But it kind of speaks a little bit to the British reasonableness of it all, you know, and I hope that they can, I hope Alex continues the good fight on this one. All right, Tony. So thank you very much for your reporting this week and your commentary. Any notes on what might be coming up?
Well, I got to get back on my bike and get home. So
Yeah,
then I'll figure things out.
fair enough. All right, folks. Well, you'll see a new week of stuff coming up here. Again, there is the address for Tony's Substack. Get subscribed, get your notifications, check in every day, and then check back in with us on Mondays for the wrap up. We will see you next week. Bye-bye.